In this video, we're going to go over how to quote the text. Before I show you how to complete the assignment, the first thing I want to do is I want to take a look at a few characteristics of quoting. So first of all, when we're quoting, we need to keep in mind that we're always going to use a sentence starter from our interactive notebook before we quote, because we always need to give credit to the text. So when we look at our sentence starters, you're going to notice that the top part of the sentence starters, this is for paraphrasing, so we're not working on this today in this assignment. We are actually working on the bottom sentence starters. So we can choose any of these sentence starters from the bottom when quoting. Also, when we quote, we need to use the author's exact words. And that means we don't change anything, we don't shorten it up. Even if there's a misspelling from the author or a grammatical error, we don't change anything. Now, you can use more than one sentence, so you could use several sentences to prove your point. But remember, we're not changing any of the author's words. And finally, when we quote, we need to use quotation marks around the actual quote. So with that in mind, we're going to go to our assignment, and we're going to do the first one together. So when we take a look at this assignment, you're going to notice that we have a topic sentence, and that I'm giving you your opinion that you're trying to prove. So for number one, our topic sentence is boredom is bad. So our goal is, it's kind of like we're in court, and we're trying to prove to the judge that boredom is bad, and we're trying to gather evidence from our article that really proves why boredom is bad. So if we take a look at our steps here, our first step is we need to find a quote from the text to prove this opinion. So if we take a look at our text, we're looking for a sentence. Now any sentence in here is fair game. So I can use captions, anything the author writes. So when I'm looking through this text, the first sentence that stands out to me is this sentence right here. So that's my sentence. So I completed step one. Now I'm ready for step two, and it says highlight any color the quote that you found in your article. Okay, if you don't have a highlighter, you can underline it, but the reason I'm having you do this is because when I read your response, so when I read what you type down here, I want to make sure that your words are the exact same thing as the author's words. So in order to do this, you're going to need the actual paper copy of this article. So if you don't have it, you can come see me and I'll give you another one. And you're also going to need to put your name up top, because when you hand it in, I want to know that it's yours. You're going to underline or highlight this sentence right here. Doing nothing is no fun. So that's step two. Step two is done. I'm ready for step three. Step three says use a sentence starter to give credit to the text. Highlight your sentence starter green. So that takes us back to our interactive notebook page. And I can use any of these sentence starters I want. Any of them work. So I'm just going to go with the first one. So I'm going to put on page, and I need to figure out what page it is. Author says, and I need to figure out who the author is. So if I go back to my article, I'm going to notice that it's on page 28, and our author is Kristen Lewis. So I'm going to write on page 28, Kristen Lewis says. Now, notice how we need to highlight this green. And you can do that at first, but I recommend until you get really used to highlighting. It's, to me, easier to write the entire thing out and then go back and highlight it. Because otherwise your highlights kind of want to bleed into each other. And once you're good at highlighting, you can fix that easily. But for now, I would just not highlight yet. Write the whole thing and then highlight when you're finished. So our next job, we're on step 4, and we're going to write our quote. So if we go back to the article, we're going to write this exact thing, not changing any words. Doing nothing is no fun. Remember, we need quotation marks. That's why I have those at first. I'm going to put doing nothing is no fun. End of quotes. Now I can highlight. So to highlight, we're going to start with the green. So because our sentence starter is green, I'm going to take my mouse and I'm going to click on it right before the first word. Notice how the cursor is flashing right before the O on. Then I'm going to hold my shift key down, and while that shift key is held down, I'm going to push my right arrow key, and I'm going to push it all the way up to the last word in the sentence starter. So my last word in my sentence starter says, so I'm going to push this all the way up to that. My next job is I'm going to release my shift key. I don't have to push my arrow anymore, because notice how it's highlighted in blue. That tells me that's what's going to be highlighted. I'm going to go up top to this A, and I'm going to click on it. And notice when I click on it, I have an option of text or highlight. It's always on text. That's like the default where it's always set. We want it to be on highlight because we want to keep the individual letters in the text black. So if I click highlight, this is where I want it to be. I'm going to click green. And then if I click, notice how it's still kind of highlighted blue. That's because it's still like working with that section of text. If I click anywhere outside of that, my blue goes away and it's a nice green. The next step is I want to highlight my quote red. Notice I need my mouse flashing on the first word of my quote, and I'm going to include my quotation mark, so it's flashing right before my quotation mark. And I'm going to do the same thing, and I'm going to hold my shift key down and I'm going to arrow it over all the way to the last quote. I'm going to go back up to the A. I'm going to click on it. I'm going to click on highlight, and then I'm going to click on red, and I'm finished. Now I do want to say one thing about these sentence starters. When you use the title of the text, there's a couple things to keep in mind. First of all, the title needs to be capitalized, and secondly, technically your title should have quotation marks around it. So your author doesn't need quotation marks around him or her, but the title does. The next thing I want to do is I want to go through and I want to briefly talk about the other two that you're going to be completing. For number 2, notice you have the same opinion. This is the same exact topic sentence. Boredom is bad. So your job is you're going to go and you're going to find a different quote from what we used to prove that boredom is bad. And then you're going to go through the same exact steps. You still need a sentence starter. You can use a different sentence starter. You still need to put quotation marks around it. You still need to highlight it. So it should look kind of like this, except a different quote. And if you want to, you can use a different sentence starter. For number 3, notice how we changed sides now. So we're saying boredom isn't bad. So basically, you're going to find a quote that proves that boredom is good. And then you're going to go through the same steps. You need a sentence starter. That sentence starter needs to be green, and your quote needs to be highlighted red. This bottom part, this is what I'll be filling out when I grade it. If you have any questions, please either send me a comment on this assignment or you can talk to me in class.